Hello, this is Idodmg and welcome back to the channel. In this last Epoch video, I want to give you an update of the mage that I theory crafted a few days ago, right before 0.9 came out. If you watched that video, I really appreciate it. I really just have fun talking about the game and just kind of nerding out. I really enjoy theory crafting my builds before I play them. It's one of my favorite parts of the game, honestly. But I figured I'd go ahead and give you an update here and let you know how the mage is playing out. I'm not to empowered timelines yet, and I have not done much arena. However, I think the build could get there. I just need to find more time to play. Let's go ahead and talk about my setup for the Mage Spellblade on last Epoch. Let's go ahead and start with skills. That's the bread and butter for the game overall anyway, and they have the most interesting skill trees. So let's go ahead and talk about what I am using. A lot of the skills here are going to be tied to the mastery, so you will not unlock them until later. These are we're using Flame Reave, Enchant Weapon, Firebrand, and Surge. We're using all four of the Spellblade skills. While leveling up, I pretty much just used Lightning Blast and Static until I got to the end of time, and then was able to start investing into the Spellblade tree. The very first skill that I like to use, and I would say is my main damaging ability, is Flame Reave. Now, this skill, and we're not going to go super in depth here, we're just going to kind of talk about what I did. So we went into fire damage, ignite chance, width, and we really went into that fire aura. Fire aura is a massive part of this build, and this is just a passive thing that we will talk about in the video, and I will have the timestamps down below. Flame Reave just helps us dish out more damage while the aura is ticking. We also spec'd over here into explosion chance on kill, increasing that explosion area and damage. I feel like these 5 points could probably be invested elsewhere. One of the main other highlight nodes aside from your fire aura here is the mana cost reduction node. Absolutely massive, and I felt like I really needed this to make the skill work the way I wanted. Now, next up, we have Flame Ward. This is going to be your survival and ward generating ability. Our main defense and the way we stay alive with this build is through ward. Now, ward, you could spec this into more of just giving you more ward, which I feel like I may have to do later on once I need more survival. But for now and for leveling up, I was specialized into allowing it to do more damage. And again, generating that fire aura while this ability is active. And then also with this skill, remember it has two parts, your ward generation and then your retaliation damage. So we spec'd into retaliation damage and area. This really does help when you run into a pack of mobs and that aura is ticking, you pop your flame ward, get that retaliation going. And then you also have that burst of ward when you start to use your Flame Reave. The third ability that we use, and we're going to talk about rotation and all that as well. Again, there are timestamps down below if you want to skip around in the video here, but I do recommend you just watch it all the way through because, hey, let's hang out and talk about last Epoch. Firebrand, this is going to be your filler ability when you're out of mana, and what this ability is it generates ward. That's my main use for it, but it also ramps up your next melee ability. In this case, it is Flame Reave. So we're going to get 4 stacks of Firebrand, and then we can cast Flame Reave. Now, when I'm playing, I'm not always doing that. I'm not just always 1, 2, 3, 4 Firebrands, and then Flame Reave, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 Firebrands. I'm not doing that when I'm playing. And now, if you really wanted to maximize your gameplay, that's probably best to dish out the most damage. However, for me, I usually just spam Flame Reave until I am out of mana, and then I come over here to Firebrand. And then by the time the pack's dead, my mana regenerates by the time I get to the next group of monsters. But I feel like if you're in a longer fight, like a boss fight or something like that, that's when the rotation will really come into play. And again, we'll talk about that later in the video. The next skill I use here, and this is another utility skill that we're going to use for this build, this is Enchant Weapon. And this is going to have 2 parts as well, an active and a passive part of the skill. So while you have the skill equipped, so just passively, you're going to be getting melee ignite chance because ignites are another huge part of this build and another source of damage. However, things will die so fast that you're not going to have a lot of time to really stack up ignites unless you're on a boss fight. You're also going to get ignite duration. Now, this is ignite from all of your abilities. This is absolutely huge. We're also going with conflagrate and searing conflagration. What this is whenever you use your enchant weapon, it will consume all the ignite stacks on enemies that are nearby, and all the damage is dealt instantly instead of over time. So it is a nice little burst if you have a lot of stacks built up. Personally, I think you could invest these 5 points elsewhere in the tree, perhaps melee attack speed. There's lots of different options you could do, but for now it's all right, and I like it. The other thing we spec'd into was burst of fire. So while Enchant Weapon is active, whenever you hit an ignited enemy, you can cast a fire burst towards them, and it has a 2-second cooldown. However, we spec into cooldown reduction over here and burst damage. This ability is pretty cool, and I see it going sometimes. I don't know if it's definitely, like the best thing. You could probably maybe use these other 4 points elsewhere in this tree, but this tree, a lot of it is, elemental conversion here with shock or frost. And then you have down here is your way to automatically recast the ability, which I think I'm going to spec into this and get out of the configuration and go down here instead. Yep, that's what I'm doing with that so far. We also have Surge. This is a utility skill in the sense that this is how we're getting our mobility. This is how we're kind of teleporting around the map. While you're leveling up, make sure you use teleport, and then this will replace teleport once you get the ability unlocked in the Spellblade tree. It's the very last skill. I think you had to be like 30 or 40 points in this thing to unlock this ability. Surge is great not only for the mobility, but also for the ward generation. And the way that this works is you have Storm Battery. While Surge is on cooldown, whenever you use a melee attack and hit one enemy, you get 1 stack of dormant energy up to a certain maximum. Now I have, the more points you put into this specific node, you get more stacks. So we can stack it up to 10 times. And what's really cool and makes this really shine for this build is when you consume those stacks, which you consume the stacks when you use Surge again, you gain ward. 30 ward per stack. That's 300 ward right there every 4 seconds if you're using this every single cooldown and getting maximum stacks. Now we also went over here into Fire Aura. Whenever you consume a stack of dormant energy, this is to get more aura stacks. I've gotten up to like 21 stacks of Fire Aura, which is huge, and we will talk about the Fire Aura aspect here soon. Now up here is where you're going to convert the lightning over to shock. Now this one, you could bypass this, but the reason I went this route is so that it auto casts Flame Reave at the end of the dash. Now the reason I would say to not convert this is over on the passive tree for Spellblade, there is a node in here. It's actually over on the mage passive skill tree, and this is another ward generator right here. So you can use a fire and lightning skill, and they both give you ward. So if you're only doing fire, you're only going to be getting the bonus from fire, but if you have lightning, you're kind of doubling up on your bonus there. I haven't spec'd into it because my build is pure fire and there's no lightning. We also went into the Surge nodes here to get more ward gain as well. Overall, this ability is really what stitches the build together for our mobility and survivability. All right, let's go ahead and talk about skill setup and rotation. Let's go ahead and just get to a little bit of gameplay here. Take a little break from nerding out on those skill trees and passive trees and all that good stuff. So the way that this build really works is you have your Fire Aura that you build up from this passive node on the Spellblade tree right here. Every time you move, you have a chance to cast this Fire Aura. The way that you're going to actually play this thing is you're always going to be using your Fire Aura pretty much every cooldown. You're going to use your Surge every single cooldown, and you're going to use your Enchant every single cooldown. Other than that, it really just comes down to managing your mana pool. Flame Reave does cost quite a bit of mana to actually cast, so you'll see here I may end up going out of mana. I probably won't because this is kind of an easier map. Since I'm just pretty much running through one-shotting mobs. Here we go. Here's a bit more of a tanky enemy here. So you can see I'm using Flame Reave. And my mana's really not going down as fast as I thought it would. But as you go through these things, your mana will go down. You can see it's about half now. So if I just continue rushing through this thing, eventually I will run out of mana. When I do run out of mana, I'll switch over to Firebrand. So the most optimal rotation would be to start with your Flame Reave Surge, and while your Surge is on cooldown, just spam your Flame Reave ability. And when your Surge is off cooldown, go ahead and use it. And then you're going to use your Firebrand until it's off cooldown. Use your Surge again. Spam your Flame Reave. Just kind of go back and forth between the two. And that way you're probably never really going to run out of mana. That would be the most efficient way I would see of doing rotation, and that's kind of how the gameplay would work. Now, let's go ahead and talk about a couple little other synergies and really interesting parts of this build that you may have noticed during combat. So this Enchant Weapon, and while I was fighting a tanky enemy in there, I think it might have killed me, but while I was doing it, while I was recording this video, I noticed that I had about 20-25 stacks of Ignite and used the Conflagrate node, and it really did chunk down that boss's health. So with that in mind, I know earlier in the video I said I was going to probably respec for auto casting here. I don't think that's true. I think I will stick with Confligate because it is massive burst damage. Okay, it's finally time. Let's go ahead and talk about Fire Aura. This is the bread and butter to this build, and keep in mind, this is just how I'm playing. There's many ways you can take this thing. I'm going to go ahead and get it out of the way right now. Fire Aura can be converted to either cold or lightning, so you can keep that in mind for your potential builds. But for me, I picked up the Fire Aura here, and the very first time that you're going to actually unlock Fire Aura is going to be with your Flame Ward that we talked about earlier. In this node right here, when you first unlock it, it's not very big, and it's really not a very impressive sized aura or ability. But as you continue to ramp this up through all of your different skill nodes that we've talked about, and the combination of your passive trees and your idols and some affixes on gear, you can really ramp this Fire Aura up. So there's that node. Each second, if you're moving or using a melee attack, you have a chance to cast Fire Aura, double the effect if you don't have Fire Aura active. So this, and if you go past 100% chance, you're going to be casting double stacks of Fire Aura, because just running here, you can see I've already stacked it up. I think I can get up to 5 or 6 stacks. Maybe only 3, I don't know, but you can see there's 5. That's because I use my Flame Ward. But you can see down here I have stacks of this Fire Aura. So the more chances you have, the more stacks you're going to get, the more damage you're going to do. I also went over here on the passive tree to increase the area of Fire Aura, as well as the fire damage per second. There's some idols you can pick up as well that are going to help this out. I only have one, I think, currently that increases Fire Aura area, and I'm currently using quite a bit of idols to help with my ward, because ward is a massive part of this build, and you're going to get to a point where you're going to be dying pretty frequently if you can't sustain your ward. You're going to be wanting to pick up your ward nodes from your mage tree right here. This top one right here gives you ward, and ward retention is important as well. That's how you keep your ward. If you don't have any retention, your ward will just drain really fast. So that's one source of ward, and you can just, I'll have the build linked in the description below over on Last Epoch tools as well. But you can see here, there's lots of options to pick up ward. So just keep an eye out, use common sense. You're going to want ward per second. You're going to want ward on hit, ward on mana use, all the ward you can get. Ward retention, you're going to want all of it. I personally, there are idols you can get that give you ward when you use a potion. I personally try to stay away from that because I'm not constantly spamming health potions. So I think they're pretty useless. Here we go. There's one. And the reason I have this idol here is because there's chance to gain 20 ward on melee hit. A good goal to strive for, especially once you're starting the early end game, is to strive to be able to sustain at least 1,000 ward while you're in combat. So the ways you're going to generate ward, again, is your flame ward ability and casting that surge using your melee attacks to build up those stacks, and then used again. Those are going to be your main sources of ward other than your passive skills, abilities, and all that stuff. Now, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the passive tree here. And again, I went mostly ward, and other than this Fire Aura here, you can also pick up more Fire Aura chance over here as well. And it also, you get ward per second, per stack. It just all synergizes really well. Last but not least, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about gear. I know I didn't super break down the passive tree, but literally, man, just look out for ward and Fire Aura and you're going to be good to go. So over on the gear, I haven't sat here and said you need this on every single item, like what's best in slot or anything like that. I'm just going to tell you what I generally look out for. So I look out for anything that's going to improve my sheet damage on my abilities. Now, my sheet damage is pretty low right now because I had to scale back and go a little bit more for ward. But you're going to want intelligence. You're going to want crit chance. You don't really need spell damage. Now, I know that your Fire Aura does count as a spell. But for me personally, I went more for intelligence, damage over time, fire damage. They also added the new area tag you could go for as well. And then, of course, don't neglect your resistances like I did pretty much the entire game. I'll be honest with you, while I was leveling up and working on this build, I never really looked at my resistances, and I managed to do okay. And the last thing I want to note here on idols is some of these you can find increased fire damage, and it's doubled if you have over 300 max mana. So you do want to make sure you have at least 300 mana for your mana pool. You want to keep it above 300, and that probably won't happen until later on in the game. So some of the affixes, you're going to want mana on them as well to help boost up that mana pool. There's some items that have mana as an implicit stat as well, which really helps, like this helmet right here. There's some uniques you can get in the game as well that help out early on. However, I've steered away from uniques personally just because I like that freedom of affixes and crafting what I want on gear. There is a ring that's elusive to me that Wootlink pointed out that allows your Flame Reave to shoot out around you, but I haven't found it yet, so maybe if I do, I'll make a video just about that ring, who knows. But you can get a Calamity. This is a headpiece that helps out with fire damage, Ignite. That's another affix you're going to want to hunt for is Ignite chance, Ignite damage. I also found this weapon, which has Spreading Flames, because one of these abilities over here, yeah, it was Firebrand over here, had Spreading Flames. I think there was some other, but Spreading Flames really ended up not being that important of a thing compared to the Fire Aura. I think there's also like Prism Wraps, because elemental damage would also help boost up your damage, because fire is one of the 3 elements. Anything that has elemental as a tag, like elemental resistance, elemental damage, is fire, lightning, and cold, so it covers all 3. So if you could find an item that has like elemental damage and fire damage on it, for example, you know, you're double dipping there on increasing that damage for your fire aura and pretty much for the entire build. But yeah, as far as like build defining uniques, other than that ring that I haven't found yet, I really didn't come across any. I really just enjoy the freedom of hunting for my own affixes and crafting as I see fit. I actually managed to find the ring while I was recording the video, so here you go. Let's go ahead and talk about it now. What Sunwreath does is it makes the Flame Reave shoot out in a ring around you. Now, if you did specialize into that mana reduction, it reduces the range on this thing and makes it really tiny. So what I ended up doing was actually speccing out of those 5 points in there once I found the ring, so that the area is back to normal and it's almost the entire size. So what I would recommend you do is, if you have not found the ring, just specialize into the mana cost reduction so that you can spam Flame Reave. And once you find the ring, go ahead and take your points out of there. That's going to wrap it up for this Spellblade video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really hope that you enjoyed the theory crafting video I did a couple days ago, and then now seeing how the build has actually played out. And really, at the end of the day with my build guides, I really hope that I can inspire you to make your own build and maybe give you some ideas for a future build. But hey, if you want to follow this build and you like it, that's even more awesome. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget, if you found this video useful, to like and subscribe. Consider joining our Discord today. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.